So yesterday we started a series and looking at Revelation and the end times. And yesterday I said that basically, in order to do that successfully, then we would need to spend some time just in this segment looking at the grand theme of that runs throughout the Bible. So to do that, we're going to go right back to the beginning, and we're going to start at the beginning of the end. Now, the Bible's first book is the book of Genesis, and it tells the story of the beginning, and it describes God's creative works right there at the beginning in Genesis chapter 1. And it also talks about how Genesis sets out the first ever divine prophecy, which was uttered by God himself in the Garden of Eden some 6,000 years ago. Set the scene, basically, a serpent had just been used to deceive the first woman, Eve, and she in turn managed to persuade Adam, the first man, to join her in breaking God's law by eating the fruit from the forbidden tree. Now, we're all very familiar with the story, I'm sure. And that story, that act of eating from the forbidden tree is what we call the original sin. So basically, sin came into the world at that point, and in passing judgment on the sinful couple, God also passed judgment on the serpent that originally started the ball rolling and tempted Eve. And this is what God said to the serpent. This is reading from Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. He said, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." That is a prophecy. That's the prophecy that I'm going to look at today. That prophecy actually sets the theme for the whole Bible, including the book of Revelation, which is where we're actually going to go with this. See, immediately after uttering that prophecy, or that judgment on the serpent, God expelled our first parents from Eden. No longer could they look forward to the everlasting life of paradise. They would in fact have to live out the rest of their lives in the unprepared wasteland outside of the garden, and under the sentence of death. And subsequently, because death was now in the world, they then gave birth to, they produced sin-laden children. So what though does this Eden prophecy of Genesis chapter 3 and verse 15, what does it mean? Who are involved? How does it link to the book of Revelation? And what message does it have for us today? And I think in order to understand the tragic events that led to God uttering that prophecy, then we need to know the answers to those questions. So the prophecy of Genesis 3:15. Let's think about this first of all. First of all, it was addressed to the serpent that had lied to Eve, suggesting that, the serpent basically suggested to Eve that that she wouldn't die if she disobeyed God, but instead she would become somewhat independent. In fact, the Bible goes as far as to say she would become like God, so i.e. a goddess. The serpent thus made God out to be a liar, and insinuated that humans could improve their lot in life simply by rejecting God's supreme rulership. So therefore God's sovereignty had been challenged, and basically his good name dragged through the mud by this act. We'll see in a later segment how the book of Revelation describes the righteous judge God, how he uses the kingdom rule of his son, Jesus Christ, to vindicate his name, to vindicate his sovereignty and to clear his name. And we will see that in a later segment. As for the term serpent, well, we all know that the serpent in the story is not a literal snake. It is actually the one that they call devil or Satan, which the Bible describes as the one who is deceiving or misleading the entire inhabited earth. So we know that that's what the serpent represents. But what of the woman? Genesis 3:15 next speaks of the woman. Now Eve probably thought that when God said the woman, he was immediately talking about her, being that she was the only woman at the time. But in fact, a long-lasting enmity between Eve and Satan would be somewhat impossible, since Eve died more than 5,000 years ago. But no, since the serpent that God addressed is an invisible spirit creature, we would have to assume that the woman is also from the spiritual realm, if you like. We'll see in a later segment again that Revelation confirmed that the woman spoken of in this prophecy is in fact God's heavenly realm of angels. So when we get to that point, this all becomes a lot clearer, and what I'm saying today will fit into the narrative. I'm trying to get through this in 10 minutes, of course. Next, two seeds appear at Genesis 3:15. There will be enmity between the two seeds. Now, we should be deeply interested in these two seeds because they are directly related to the issue of rightful sovereignty over the earth, and it involves each one of us. First, there's the seed of Satan, or of the serpent, and this would surely include the other fallen angels that joined Satan in his rebellion, and they would make up his invisible army. But further than that, in John chapter 8 verse 44, Jesus told the Jewish religious leaders, I can't even get my words out, of his day. He said this to them. He said, "You belong to your father the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires." That's John 8:44. By their opposition to God's Son, Jesus, those religious leaders showed that they were Satan's offspring, that they were in fact part of Satan's seed, if you like, and they were serving him as his figurative father. And many other humans throughout history have similarly identified themselves by doing Satan's will. In fact, today there is a whole movement, a religion, if you like, who boldly proclaim themselves as Satanists, and they follow their father, the devil. But the prophecy at Genesis 3:15 refers finally to the seed of the woman. So while Satan was developing his seed, God was also preparing for his bride-like army to produce a seed as well. And for some 4,000 plus years, God progressively revealed to obedient, God-fearing people the details of that coming seed. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, among others, could build the faith in this promise that the seed would appear in their genealogical line. And Satan and his henchmen would often persecute servants of God from that lineage because of their unswerving faith, which basically to try and make this prophecy not come to light, if you like. But then at last, in the year 29 AD, the perfect man Jesus, he presented himself at the River Jordan and was baptized, and it was there that God acknowledged Jesus by saying these words. He said, "This is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased." Jesus was there identified as having been sent forth from God's spiritual realm in heaven, and he was anointed to restore the rulership over the earth in God's name, and thus setting once and for all the issue involving sovereignty, which again we will discuss in a future segment. Jesus then is the principal one of the seed of the woman. You know, he was the foretold Messiah. Um, yeah, I think that's probably enough information for now. I've just gone over my 10 minutes. So in the next segment, the plan is to look a bit more at how the story unfolds and just tie up any loose ends before we start in our actual study of the book of Revelation. I know it seems a long way getting there, but we'll get there. Yeah, so bear with me. Join me on the journey as next time we look at the story so far. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.